Cardin B's night of charm and celebrity ended in chaos, as he faced the fury of a city and the full force of the law after a shocking assault left everyone questioning who he really was. Cardin B had always been a familiar face in the city's nightlife scene. Known for his charm and flashy lifestyle, he was often seen at the trendy clubs, attended by a mix of celebrities and socialites. Many considered him charismatic, even magnetic, the kind of person whose presence could dominate a room without effort. But beneath the glamorous exterior, there were murmurs, small unnoticed disputes, whispers of conflicts that never made the headlines. No one could have imagined that a single Friday night would unravel everything he had built. It began as a routine evening at a downtown nightclub. Cardin B had arrived with friends, greeted by fans and acquaintances, and settled into the familiar rhythm of music, lights, and laughter. But tensions were already simmering elsewhere. Across the street, a disagreement between the patrons escalated quickly. Somehow, Cardin B became entangled. Witnesses later described a sudden, shocking eruption of violence. Bottles shattered against the concrete, screams echoed down the streets, and the victim fell to the pavement, blood soaking through clothes and pooling on the sidewalk. The chaotic scene drew a crowd, some filming with phones, others frozen in disbelief, unsure whether to help or flee. Emergency responders arrived within minutes, attempting to contain the situation. Paramedics rushed to the injured individual, working frantically to stabilize them before transporting them to the hospital. Meanwhile, law enforcement began to piece together the events, cordoning off the area and collecting statements. The footage from nearby surveillance cameras captured everything: the argument, the sudden swing of aggression, the violent collapse. It was a grim sequence, replayed on social media, triggering shock and outrage. Comments poured in from viewers across the city, some expressing horror, others disbelief that someone as well-known and seemingly composed as Cardin B could be at the center of such brutality. By night's end, Cardin B had been arrested. The severity of the assault charges left little room for speculation, though questions immediately arose about motive. Was this a spontaneous act fueled by anger, or had the confrontation been orchestrated? As details emerged, it became apparent that the incident was more complex than a simple street fight. Old grudges, private conflicts, and subtle provocations came under scrutiny, casting shadows over Cardin B's public persona. In a matter of hours, the city's perception of him shifted from glamorous and untouchable to dangerous and unpredictable, leaving residents and fans alike questioning who he really was and what had driven him to commit such a shocking act. The investigation into the assault began immediately after Cardin B's arrest, and from the start, it was clear that the case would be anything but straightforward. Detectives meticulously reviewed surveillance footage, interviewed witnesses, and collected physical evidence from the nightclub and surrounding streets. Each new piece of information seemed to deepen the mystery rather than clarify it. Witness accounts conflicted in surprising ways. Some claimed that Cardin B had approached the victim aggressively, while others insisted he had only intervened after another individual instigated the confrontation. Even the timeline of events was disputed, with variations in how long the altercation lasted and who acted first. Forensic evidence became a central focus. Blood spatter patterns, fingerprints, and the trajectory of broken bottles all offered clues, but the experts noted inconsistencies that raised further questions. In addition, medical reports detailed the extent of the victim's injuries, showing a combination of blunt force trauma and cuts that suggested multiple impacts from different angles. These findings challenged early assumptions that the assault had been impulsive, hinting instead at a more complicated chain of events. Cell phone records provided another layer of complexity. Messages exchanged between Cardin B and the victim in the days prior to the incident revealed tense conversations, laced with insults and veiled threats. Legal analysts later suggested that these exchanges could indicate a pre-existing conflict rather than a spontaneous flare-up. Investigators also traced social media interactions that showed minor disputes escalating online, creating a digital trail that painted a picture of escalating tension. During interviews, law enforcement noticed behavioral patterns that fueled speculation about motive. Friends and acquaintances described Cardin B as generally calm but capable of sudden, intense anger. Some pointed to past disagreements that had never been reported publicly, suggesting that the assault might have been the culmination of months of unresolved friction. Meanwhile, detectives uncovered details of the victim's background that hinted at provocative behavior, though nothing that legally justified the attack. As the investigation unfolded, public interest grew. News outlets reported every development, dissecting minute details and broadcasting theories on motive and intent. The combination of celebrity, brutality, and unanswered questions kept the story alive in the media and online forums. What initially appeared to be a single night of violence had evolved into a tangled web of relationships, grievances, and evidence that promised to make the trial a gripping and unpredictable battle. Every new revelation added suspense, leaving the city on edge and eager to learn how the courtroom drama would ultimately unfold. The trial of Cardin B began under intense public scrutiny, with cameras stationed outside the courthouse and social media buzzing with speculation. From the first day, it was clear that this would be more than a typical assault case. The courtroom itself became a stage for a battle of wits and strategy, as Cardin B faced a prosecution determined to portray him as violent and dangerous, while his defense attorneys worked tirelessly to dismantle every piece of evidence against him. The prosecution presented a detailed timeline of events, beginning with surveillance footage that appeared to show Cardin B approaching the victim and engaging in the initial act of aggression. Witnesses took the stand, some offering graphic descriptions of the moment the victim fell to the ground, while others described the chaos of the scene. The prosecution emphasized the severity of the injuries, highlighting how quickly a social encounter turned deadly. Their narrative suggested that Cardin B's actions were deliberate, fueled by anger, and entirely preventable. In response, Cardin B's defense team attacked every claim with precision. They questioned the reliability of eyewitness testimony, pointing out contradictions and inconsistencies in recollections of the same events. Some witnesses had initially described a single assailant but later admitted to seeing multiple people involved. The defense also scrutinized the surveillance footage, arguing that it captured only fragments of the incident and left critical gaps in the timeline. Forensic experts called by the defense challenged the initial medical assessments, suggesting that the injuries could have resulted from a variety of scenarios, including accidental collisions or interference from other individuals present at the scene. The courtroom grew increasingly tense as attorneys engaged in sharp cross-examinations, probing for weaknesses in statements and evidence. Legal maneuvers, objections, and dramatic revelations created an atmosphere of uncertainty. Every piece of testimony seemed to shift the narrative, forcing the jury and the public to reconsider what had truly happened that night. Adding to the suspense, subtle details emerged about Cardin B's state of mind, his interactions leading up to the incident, and the possible influence of provocation from the victim. Each revelation complicated the story, leaving spectators and jurors questioning whether the assault was an impulsive act or part of a more complicated sequence of events. The trial became a psychological chess match, testing the limits of memory, perception, and legal strategy. By the end of the third week, it was clear that the case would not be resolved easily, and the courtroom was left simmering with tension, waiting for the next shocking twist that could determine Cardin B's fate. Midway through the trial, a startling turn of events sent shockwaves through the courtroom. A new witness came forward, someone who had previously remained silent, claiming to have observed the initial confrontation from a nearby alley. Their testimony directly contradicted earlier accounts, suggesting that another individual had provoked the fight before Cardin B became involved. The courtroom buzzed with disbelief as the defense team seized on this revelation, presenting it as critical evidence that cast serious doubt on the prosecution's narrative. This sudden development forced the prosecution to reevaluate their strategy. They scrutinized the witnesses' credibility, uncovering inconsistencies in prior statements and questioning why the testimony had emerged so late in the trial. Despite their efforts, the defense successfully framed this new account as a turning point, arguing that reasonable doubt now existed regarding Cardin B's responsibility for the assault. For the first time, the jury seemed uncertain, and the courtroom tension grew palpable. Meanwhile, investigators uncovered digital evidence that added another layer of complexity. Private messages exchanged between Cardin B and the victim surfaced, revealing a history of provocation and taunting. The emails and texts suggested that the victim had deliberately escalated tensions, potentially attempting to bait Cardin B into a confrontation. This evidence reinforced the defense's argument that the assault may have been reactive rather than premeditated, further complicating public perception of the case. Even forensic experts introduced unexpected twists. A detailed analysis of the blood spatter and injuries indicated the possibility of multiple impacts from different angles. Supporting the theory that more than one person had contributed to the chaos, the defense used this to argue that Cardin B had not acted alone and that some injuries could have been accidental or inflicted by others present at the scene. As these revelations emerged, the trial took on a cinematic intensity. The public followed every development closely, debates raging across news outlets and social media platforms. Every new piece of evidence, every contradiction in testimony, seemed to shift the story, transforming what had initially appeared to be a clear-cut assault into a tangled web of motives, hidden agendas, and secrets. Cardin B's case was no longer simply about guilt or innocence. It had become a study in perception, trust, and the unpredictability of human behavior under pressure. The courtroom was now a stage where suspense and uncertainty ruled, leaving everyone watching to wonder what shocking twist might come next and how it would ultimately shape the fate of Cardin B. After weeks of tense testimony, the trial of Cardin B finally approached its conclusion. The courtroom had been a battleground of evidence, conflicting testimonies, and unexpected revelations, and now all eyes turned to the jury. The deliberation process was painstaking. Jurors pored over every detail presented during the trial. From surveillance footage to witness statements, forensic reports, and private messages between Cardin B and the victim, each piece of evidence seemed to shift in importance as they debated, analyzed, and questioned the reliability of what they had seen and heard. Outside the courthouse, the city remained captivated. News outlets provided round-the-clock coverage, while social media erupted with speculation and debate. Everyone had an opinion on Cardin B's guilt or innocence, yet even those closest to the events admitted that the truth seemed elusive. The case had revealed the complexity of human behavior and the difficulty of understanding a single moment of violence in isolation. What seemed like a straightforward assault on that fateful night had evolved into a tangled story of provocation, hidden motives, and courtroom strategy. Inside the courtroom, tension was palpable as the jury returned with their verdict. Cardin B, who had remained composed throughout the trial, waited silently, his eyes fixed on the foreperson. The announcement was deliberate and methodical, every word carrying immense weight. When the verdict was read, reactions were immediate and intense. Some observers expressed relief, convinced that justice had been served. Others reacted with shock, feeling that the full story of that night might never be known. Regardless of opinion, the outcome was final, though its implications would linger far beyond the courthouse walls. The aftermath of the trial was a mix of reflection and scrutiny. Cardin B faced the consequences imposed by the legal system, while both supporters and critics examined what had unfolded in painstaking detail. Legal experts highlighted the strengths and weaknesses of both the prosecution and defense, noting how every twist and revelation had played a pivotal role in shaping the outcome. Meanwhile, investigators and journalists continued to dissect the case, uncovering minor details that had gone unnoticed during the trial. Ultimately, the trial left a lasting impression on everyone involved. It revealed the fragility of reputation, the complexity of human behavior under pressure, and the unpredictable ways in which a single night of violence could ripple through lives and communities. For Cardin B, the story did not end with the verdict. It marked the beginning of a new chapter, one defined by reflection, consequence, and the lingering questions about what truly happened that night. The case would remain a reference point for years to come, a stark reminder of how quickly life can change and how the truth can be more complicated than it first appears.